Have you ever found yourself at a crossroads, facing a mystery that could change your life forever? In this gripping story, an elderly woman, burdened by the sorrow of losing her daughter, discovers a young girl crying at the very grave she visits every year. What begins as a quiet moment of grief soon turns into an emotional journey filled with secrets, heartbreak, and an unexpected bond between two souls searching for answers. Watch as their paths intertwine in ways neither of them could have predicted, leading to revelations that will change everything. Stay until the end to see how this powerful story unfolds from sorrow to hope, and how love and resilience can bring light even in the darkest of times. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. The elderly woman, her heart heavy with sorrow, noticed a young girl standing alone by her daughter's grave. Tears streamed down the girl's face, and as the woman approached, a chill ran down her spine when she overheard the haunting whispers coming from the girl's trembling lips. Emma's footsteps echoed softly as she wandered through the eerily quiet paths of Phoenix Cemetery, her fragile hands clutching a bouquet of delicate white flowers and a weathered photograph. Each step felt like a journey through her own grief, a relentless ache that gnawed at her soul. When she finally reached the resting place of her beloved daughter, Claire, she fell to her knees with a heaviness that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with loss. With shaking hands, she placed the flowers and the photo gently upon the cold, unforgiving marble of the headstone. "Another year, my darling Claire," Emma whispered, her voice quivering under the weight of unspoken emotions. The silence around her seemed almost unbearable, as though the very earth mourned alongside her. "It's as if just yesterday you were here, with that infectious laugh of yours and your bright, carefree spirit. Oh, how I wish I could turn back time, to hold you in my arms once more." Her fingers traced the contours of Claire's face in the photograph, a desperate attempt to feel some connection to the vibrant young woman who once filled her life with joy and light. The memories surged through her like a flood, every tender embrace, every shared moment, every heart-wrenching farewell leading up to that tragic day. Claire Scott had been the light of Emma's world. At 28, she was brimming with life, a talented graphic designer whose creativity knew no bounds. Her laugh had the power to chase away even the darkest clouds, and her mere presence could brighten any room she entered. The news of her death, that terrible day 3 years ago, had shattered not only Emma but everyone who had ever had the privilege of knowing her. A cruel car accident had stolen her away, an accident so violent and unexpected that it left nothing behind but sorrow and shattered hearts. Claire had been driving home from a work trip, her mind likely filled with thoughts of her next creative project, when her car lost control on a slick, rain-soaked road. The crash, so brutal in its suddenness, had left almost nothing recognizable, and Claire had been pronounced dead on the scene. The details, grim and merciless, were accepted without question at the time. The storm that had ravaged the night of the accident seemed a fitting reflection of the devastation it left in its wake. For Emma, the loss of Claire had been more than just the loss of a daughter. It was the loss of her entire world. Claire had been her only child, her only close family, and without her, life felt hollow, empty, and cruel. Every day was a struggle, a battle to find some semblance of peace in a world that had taken everything from her. The visits to the cemetery became her sanctuary, the only place where she could still feel close to the daughter she loved more than life itself. "They say time heals all wounds," Emma continued, her voice cracking with the weight of her grief. "But for me, the pain only grows sharper with each passing year. Did I fail you, my sweet girl? Could I have done anything to save you? Oh, how I miss you, my darling Claire." Tears welled in her eyes as she gazed at the inscription on the headstone, "Beloved daughter." The words felt like a cruel reminder of all that had been taken from her. Guilt and sorrow mingled in her heart, a bitter cocktail of emotions that never seemed to leave her. Out of nowhere, the heart-wrenching sound of crying shattered the stillness, snapping Emma back to reality. She blinked, her gaze sweeping over the area until her eyes landed on a tiny, fragile figure. It was a little girl, curled up near a grave, her small voice cracking as she whimpered, "Mommy, why did you have to leave me? I wish you were still here. I love you so much, and I miss you so much." The girl's words were laced with an unbearable sorrow that made Emma's heart tighten painfully. Tears poured down the child's cheeks, glistening in the soft, fading light. Overwhelmed by a surge of concern and empathy, Emma slowly rose to her feet, her mind spinning with questions. She approached the girl cautiously, each step measured, as if she were nearing a delicate, wounded bird. "Sweetheart," Emma murmured softly, her voice tender, yet carrying the weight of her worry. "Are you all right? Can I help you?" Her words were filled with a compassion that had always lingered deep within her, an instinct to nurture and protect, now rising to the surface. The girl lifted her tear-streaked face, her wide eyes brimming with confusion and sorrow. I come here all the time," she stammered, her sobs making her words tremble. "This is supposed to be my mommy's grave, but—" She paused, struggling to make sense of her emotions. "It doesn't have her name on it. It says Kealea Scott, but that's not my mommy. I don't understand. Why isn't her name here? Where is she?" The girl's innocence and bewilderment pierced through Emma's defenses, striking her to the core. It was as if the universe had just dropped a heavy, unsolvable riddle into her lap, a mystery she never saw coming on this otherwise quiet day. Emma slowly lowered herself to sit beside the little girl, her chest tightening with a mix of empathy and sorrow for the child's unrelenting grief. She gently placed a comforting arm around the girl's trembling shoulders, pulling her into a tender embrace. "Don't worry, darling," Emma whispered softly, trying to steady her voice. "We'll figure this out together, okay? You're not alone in this." She felt the weight of the child's pain, and in that moment, she was determined to help lift it, even if only a little. The girl sniffled, offering a small, shaky smile through her tears. "My name's Samantha," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Samantha Lewis." Emma gave a reassuring nod, her heart swelling with a deep need to protect and guide this lost little soul. "Well, Samantha," she said gently, determination flickering in her eyes, "let's find the answers you're looking for. We'll get to the bottom of this, I promise." Somewhere in the back of Emma's mind, she couldn't shake the feeling that by helping Samantha, she might just be healing her own scars, those lingering shadows of her past that had refused to fade. "Samantha, can you tell me more about your mommy?" Emma asked, her voice gentle yet persistent, hoping that somewhere in the girl's memories they might uncover a clue. She handed Samantha a handkerchief, her eyes soft with encouragement, urging her to share her story, no matter how painful. Samantha clutched the handkerchief and wiped her face, her gaze still heavy with uncertainty. "My mommy. Her name was Anna Lewis," she began, her voice fragile, as if it might break at any moment. "She always used to sing to me, and she had the brightest smile. I loved her so much, but when I was just 5 years old, she got really sick. And then she was gone," Samantha continued, her words hanging in the air like fragile glass. "They said she's buried here. But now I don't know what to believe anymore." Emma listened intently, her heart aching as she absorbed each word. This child, with her innocent confusion and sorrow, had stumbled into a dark and perplexing mystery. And Emma, driven by an unspoken need to protect and make sense of the world, silently vowed to help Samantha uncover the truth, no matter where the journey took them. Jorge, the father of the little girl, approached with a heavy heart. "It's true," he began, his voice trembling with emotion. "I've brought Samantha here countless times, always trying to soothe her, telling her that her mommy was at peace in this sacred place. But deep down, there was always something that didn't sit right with me. I couldn't understand why the name on the headstone wasn't hers. I wanted to believe it was some kind of clerical mistake, an oversight in the system," Jorge admitted, his voice now thick with confusion and simmering frustration. As he stood there, staring at the cold, unyielding stone with a name that didn't belong to his beloved wife. A storm of sorrow and desperation churned inside him. "Anna was our world," he whispered, his voice breaking with the weight of his grief. "When she left us, everything crumbled." The day we laid her to rest was a blur of agony, and I never received any official papers, just words, just promises from the hospital and the funeral home. When I saw the name Kealia Scott engraved here, I was lost. We were drowning in sorrow, too shattered to question anything properly. But the doubt has been gnawing at me ever since he confessed, his voice a painful echo of the memories and uncertainties that had haunted him for so long. Emma listened intently, her heart aching for Jorge and Samantha. She could feel the depth of their anguish as if it were her own. "Jorge," she said softly but firmly, "I believe something terribly wrong happened here, and I won't rest until we uncover the truth, not just for your daughter, but for Anna, for you, for all of you." Emma's voice was laced with resolve, her commitment to unraveling the mystery behind the misplaced headstone growing stronger with each passing second. Jorge nodded slowly, his eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and exhaustion. "Thank you, Emma. Your help means more to us than you know. Samantha deserves to know where her mother truly lies, where she can go to find peace and connection with her memory," he said, his hand gently resting on Samantha's small shoulder. The girl leaned into him, seeking comfort in the familiar warmth of her father's presence, though her eyes were filled with questions she couldn't yet voice. Emma felt a tight knot forming in her chest as she absorbed Jorge's words. The weight of his loss, and Samantha's, pressed down on her, rekindling memories of her own deep sorrow. She had also lost a daughter, and she knew too well the vast, uncharted sea of pain and uncertainty that came with such loss. No one should have to endure this kind of confusion, especially a child. Taking a deep breath, Emma's voice grew even more determined. "We're going to get to the bottom of this. We need to look at the cemetery's records. There has to be something, a mistake, an oversight, something that was missed." As she spoke, Emma's resolve solidified, and she knew in her heart that they wouldn't rest until they found the truth. Together, they would uncover the answers buried beneath layers of grief, confusion, and bureaucracy. They made the decision to head together to the cemetery office, their resolve growing stronger with each step. "We'll ask to see the records of the burials in this section of the cemetery. Something doesn't add up here, and we will uncover the truth," Emma declared, doing her best to project confidence, hoping to offer the young girl beside her a glimmer of courage amidst the storm of uncertainty. At the office, Emma approached the front desk with determined steps. The employee who greeted them was a middle-aged man with weary eyes, as though the weight of countless such requests had dulled his spirit. But Emma was undeterred. "We need to see the burial records for the grave registered under the name Kealia Scott," she said firmly. "There's a possibility that a mistake was made, and we need to clear this up for the sake of a child who's lost her mother." The man nodded, though his tired expression didn't change. He began searching through both the digital and physical files. As he worked, he mentioned that such situations were highly unusual, but he would do his best to see what had happened. Emma and Samantha stood quietly, their hands tightly clasped together as they waited. Emma could feel the tension in Samantha's small fingers, and she turned to offer a reassuring smile. "We'll get to the bottom of this, sweetheart. No matter what we find, we'll face it together," she whispered, her voice filled with both promise and determination. Samantha nodded, clinging to Emma's words as if they were a lifeline, her grip tightening in response. The minutes passed, stretching into what felt like hours, until finally, the employee looked up from his computer. His face was marked by a blend of surprise and concern. It seems there was an internal notice a few years ago regarding some confusion with the markings of graves, he revealed, his tone hesitant. "I can't provide all the details at the moment, but I will need to conduct a more thorough investigation." A wave of mixed emotions swept over Emma: relief that they might be closer to answers, but also apprehension about what those answers might reveal. "Please do that. We need to know what happened here," she pressed, her voice steady but urgent. The man assured her that he would look into it further. They thanked him before leaving the office, a faint glimmer of hope flickering in Emma's heart. She felt they were one step closer to unraveling the mystery that seemed to bind two families together in a tangled web of mistakes and hidden truths. Determined to resolve the situation, Emma decided that professional help was necessary. The following day, she sought out the expertise of Dr. Raphael Adrian, a man whose calm and composed demeanor exuded an air of quiet confidence. As she entered his office, the weight of everything she had carried for so long threatened to overwhelm her. "Dr. Adrian, thank you for seeing me on such short notice. I'm here because of a very delicate and personal matter," Emma began, her voice betraying the strain of months of uncertainty and unresolved grief. She took a deep breath, preparing to delve into the story that had brought her to this moment, knowing that with each word, she was inching closer to the answers they so desperately needed. Dr. Adrian offered her a reassuring nod, his eyes filled with genuine concern. "Please, Mrs. Adams, share with me how I might be of assistance to you," he urged gently. Emma exhaled deeply, mustering the strength to articulate the overwhelming and heart-wrenching dilemma that had been consuming her thoughts. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding involving a grave at the local cemetery. It's supposed to hold the remains of my precious daughter, but doubts have surfaced. Now, we fear that someone else entirely might be resting there." Dr. Adrian listened with unwavering focus, his fingers intertwined on the desk as he absorbed every word. "I see. And in what way do you believe I can assist you with this deeply troubling situation?" he inquired, his voice calm but laced with empathy. Gathering her composure, Emma explained, "What we need is a DNA test to verify the identity of the remains. I realize this isn't something that is typically requested, but it's crucial for me and for a little girl whose life could be profoundly affected by this uncertainty." Dr. Adrian's expression softened as he absorbed the weight of her words. "I understand the gravity of your request. Conducting a DNA test on human remains is indeed a delicate process, but not beyond the realm of possibility. However, we will need the proper legal authorization to move forward. Have you begun securing these documents?" Emma nodded, determination flickering in her eyes. "Yes, I'll start the process immediately. I know how important this is." "Once we have the necessary paperwork, Doctor," Adrian assured her while jotting down notes in his journal, "I'll make certain everything is ready on my end. There will be no unnecessary delays. I can only imagine how difficult this is for you, and I promise we will do everything in our power to bring clarity to this matter as swiftly as possible." A wave of gratitude washed over Emma, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you, Doctor. Your support means more to me than I can express. With your help, I believe we might finally find some closure for everyone involved." With the plan finally in motion, Emma felt a fragile sense of control over the situation, bracing herself for whatever revelations the DNA test might uncover. She sat on the porch of her old house, her gaze drifting absently across the garden she and Claire had lovingly nurtured together. The sky was painted in soft hues of sunset, and the flowers seemed to drink in the fading light, their colors deepening in the approaching twilight. As Emma waited for the test results, her mind began to wander through the corridors of memory, bringing back vivid images of moments she had shared with Claire, each one now tainted by a sense of foreboding. One memory, in particular, stood out: a quiet afternoon not long before Claire's disappearance. "Mom, there are things in this world that are necessary, even if they don't seem right," Claire had said cryptically as she carefully worked the soil around a delicate new plant. At the time, Emma had brushed off the comment as teenage musings, but now those words echoed ominously in her mind. laden with hidden meaning. "What were you trying to tell me?" my sweet girl Emma whispered to the wind, her unease growing into a gnawing fear. She recalled another moment that now seemed filled with unspoken tension. Claire had become increasingly distant, her once bright and carefree demeanor shadowed by something heavy and unshared. One evening at dinner, Emma had noticed a fleeting look of worry in her daughter's eyes. "Is everything all right, dear?" she had asked, her voice laced with concern. Claire had flashed her a reassuring smile, but her eyes told a different story, a silent cry for help that Emma had failed to hear. "I should have pushed harder, asked more questions," Emma lamented, her heart aching with regret for the opportunities she had missed. The weeks leading up to Claire's disappearance replayed in her mind like a haunting film. Claire had begun receiving phone calls late at night, her voice hushed as she slipped out of the room to take them in private. Emma had always respected her daughter's boundaries, trusting that Claire would come to her if something was wrong. But now that trust felt like complacency, a blind faith that had cost her dearly. "Who were you talking to, Claire? Who took you away from me?" Emma's voice cracked, the grief and longing overwhelming her as tears slipped down her cheeks. The weight of her loss pressed against her chest, suffocating in its intensity. As she sifted through these memories, Emma started to piece together a more unsettling picture of her daughter's final days. What she had once dismissed as normal teenage behavior now appeared as troubling signs of something much darker. Maybe all these small details, the cryptic comments, the distant looks, the secret phone calls had been warning signs, pieces of a larger, more sinister puzzle that Emma hadn't been able to see until now. The truth was still elusive, like a puzzle with too many missing pieces, but with each fragment of memory, the disturbing image became clearer. And with it, the painful suspicion that whatever had happened to Claire was part of something far more profound than Emma had ever imagined. Days later, the moment Emma had both dreaded and anticipated arrived. She sat in Dr. Adrian's office, her body rigid with tension, her hands gripping the armrests of the chair, as though they could anchor her to reality. Her eyes were fixed on the envelope in the doctor's hands, each second of silence between them stretching unbearably long. Dr. Adrian carefully unfolded the paper, his face deliberately composed, trying to soften the blow of the truth that would soon change Emma's world forever. "The DNA test results are here," he began, his voice calm but laced with a gravity that made Emma's heart race uncontrollably. "The remains that were tested do not match your daughter's DNA, Mrs. Adams," he revealed, his gaze steady as he delivered the devastating news. For a moment, the room seemed to spin violently around her, and Emma felt as though the very air had been snatched away, leaving her gasping for breath. "No, this can't be," she whispered, her voice so faint it was almost lost in the stillness of the office. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision as the cruel weight of reality bore down on her. Emma's mind raced, struggling to grasp the implications of those haunting words. "If it's not her, then who is buried beneath my daughter's headstone? And where is Claire?" she asked, her voice cracking with pain and confusion, each syllable a blow to the fragile hope she had clung to. Dr. Adrian gently handed her a handkerchief, his expression filled with sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I know this is overwhelming, and it only leaves you with more questions than answers," he said softly, wishing he could offer her something more, some piece of solace in the midst of her anguish. But Emma, even in the depths of her despair, felt a fire ignite within her, a mother's fierce determination rising to the surface. "I need to know what happened, doctor. I need to understand where my daughter is. I won't stop until I find her," she said, her voice steady despite the tears, her resolve unshakable. The love she carried for Claire was far too powerful to allow her to give up now. Dr. Adrian nodded, recognizing the strength in her words. "I will help you in any way that I can, Emma. The road ahead won't be easy, but we can start by contacting the local authorities, maybe even hiring a private investigator. Together we'll do everything possible to uncover the truth." Emma left the office in a haze of shock and determination, her emotions a tangled mix of grief and resolve. She knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, perhaps filled with heartbreak, but there was no alternative. She would push forward if not for herself, then for Claire. "For you, my darling girl, I will move mountains if I have to," she whispered to the overcast sky, as if the clouds might carry her message to wherever her daughter might be. This fight for the truth had only just begun. The very next day, Emma found herself standing at the entrance of Detective Brandon Parker's office, nerves swirling in her stomach, but her purpose clear. As soon as she stepped through the door, Brandon rose to greet her, a friendly but concerned expression crossing his face. "Mrs. Adams, it's good to see you again. How can I assist you today?" he asked, gesturing for her to take a seat in the worn leather chair across from his desk, which was cluttered with stacks of papers and files, each one containing someone else's story of loss or mystery. Emma sat down, her hands trembling slightly as she placed her bag on the floor beside her. She took a moment to steady herself before speaking, drawing on every ounce of courage she had left. "Mr. Parker, I'm here because I need your help with something very serious." Her voice quivered with emotion, but her determination shone through. "I've discovered that the remains in my daughter's grave, they aren't hers. I need to find out where my daughter's body is, or if." She hesitated, barely able to voice the hope that had haunted her every waking moment, if she's still alive. Detective Parker's expression turned grave as he absorbed her words, understanding the depth of her distress. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on hers. "Mrs. Adams, I promise you, we will do everything in our power to get to the bottom of this. You're not alone in this fight." Emma nodded, feeling the weight of her mission settle firmly on her shoulders. She knew the journey ahead would be grueling, filled with uncertainty and heartache, but she also knew one thing with absolute certainty: she would never stop until she found out what had happened to her beloved Claire. The battle for the truth had begun, and she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Brandon's expression darkened, his usual calm replaced by a steely resolve. "This is incredibly serious, Emma," he said, his voice low with concern. "Do you have any more information that could help us begin unraveling this mystery? Even the smallest detail could prove to be critical." He reached for his notebook, pen poised to capture every word, determined to leave no stone unturned. Emma swallowed hard, gathering her thoughts as she recalled the chaotic whirlwind of emotions and events that had unfolded since discovering the unsettling truth. "After the DNA results revealed that the remains weren't Claire's, I started thinking back to the days leading up to her disappearance. I remembered things, odd phone calls, behaviors that didn't make sense to me at the time." She began to recount every memory, every moment that now seemed like a potential clue to a puzzle far larger than she had ever imagined. Brandon listened intently, his sharp mind absorbing every word, occasionally pausing to ask for more details, his questions precise and deliberate. "You mentioned phone calls. Do you have any idea who might have been on the other end? Are there any records of these calls that we could trace?" His mind was already racing ahead, sketching out the first steps of the investigation, plotting the course that could lead them closer to the truth. As their conversation drew to a close, Brandon looked at Emma with a firm, unwavering resolve. "We'll start by tracking down those calls and speaking to the people who were around Claire during that time. I promise you, Emma, I will do everything within my power to find out what happened to your daughter. You're not in this alone." Emma felt a surge of gratitude wash over her, mingled with a fragile hope she hadn't dared to feel in what seemed like forever. Brandon's commitment and determination were like a lifeline in the storm of uncertainty that had engulfed her. She knew the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but knowing that Brandon was by her side gave her the strength to face whatever might come next. A few days later, Emma and Brandon found themselves sitting in a small, dimly lit cafe. The table in front of them was strewn with notes, photos, and documents, all evidence in the mounting investigation. Brandon leaned forward, tapping a finger on a particular photo, several faces circled in red. "Emma, take a look at this," he said, his voice hushed but intense. "I've spoken to some of Claire's former colleagues, and what I've uncovered is troubling. It seems she had gotten involved with some very dangerous people with connections to the criminal underworld." He pointed to the faces in the photo. "These individuals are well known in certain circles, the kind of circles you don't just walk into by accident." Emma stared at the photo, a cold shiver crawling up her spine. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. "My God, Brandon," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear, disbelief, and growing determination. "This is far more serious than I ever imagined. How did my daughter get tangled up with these people?" Her words were laden with anguish, but beneath the fear, there was a rising strength. She needed to understand what had led Claire down this perilous path, to uncover every piece of the puzzle until she could finally see the full picture. Emma's fear was palpable, but so was her resolve. No matter how dark the truth turned out to be, she was ready to face it head-on, for Claire's sake. And with Brandon's help, she was determined to find the answers, no matter the cost. "We're beginning to piece together the puzzle," Emma, Brandon continued, his voice steady but laced with concern. He unfolded a map, spreading it across the table between them. Several points were marked in red ink, each one representing a place Claire had been seen, places far from the norm of her daily routine. These locations are known for illicit activities. It seems Claire might have been trying to infiltrate, or perhaps she was coerced into getting involved. Either way, it's clear she was treading dangerous ground. Emma absorbed every detail, every name, and every marked location. Her mind was racing, connecting the dots, but all leading to more questions than answers. "We need to go to these places, Brandon. We need to talk to people who knew her, who saw her. If Claire was tangled up with this kind of crowd, it's risky, but it could also lead us to where she is now," she said, her voice filled with urgency and determination. Brandon nodded, the weight of the situation evident in his furrowed brow. "I agree, Emma. We'll visit these spots, but we need to do it carefully. I'll reach out to some contacts who can give us protection or more information, but I need you to stay safe. This is dangerous territory, and I don't want you taking unnecessary risks." Emma locked her gaze on Brandon, her eyes filled with an unshakable resolve. "I appreciate your concern, Brandon, but I will do whatever it takes. Nothing will stop me from uncovering the truth about my daughter. I need to know what happened to Claire, and if it means walking through fire, I'll do it, whatever it takes." Her determination was a palpable force, radiating from her like a beacon of maternal love that would not be dimmed. Brandon, seeing the fierce strength in her eyes, understood that they were in this together, ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead, no matter the cost. Later that day, Emma and Brandon found themselves driving through the lesser-known streets of Phoenix, areas Emma had rarely seen, let alone ventured into. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the city, deepening the sense of foreboding that hung in the air. Brandon gripped the steering wheel tightly, his eyes scanning the surroundings with caution, always on alert. "The places we're heading to," he began, his voice low and measured, "are known hotspots for illegal activities. We need to be vigilant and extremely careful here, Emma." Emma gazed out the window, taking in the rundown buildings, the cracked sidewalks, and the darkened alleyways that seemed to whisper secrets she wished she didn't have to uncover. "I never imagined Phoenix had places like this," she said softly, her voice tinged with disbelief and tension. How could Claire get involved with something so dangerous? What was going through her mind? The weight of the unknown pressed heavily on her heart. The girl she had raised, loved, and nurtured was somehow connected to these shadowy places, and it terrified her. But beneath the fear, there was a burning need to understand, to know why, to find her daughter and bring her home, no matter what it took. Brandon glanced at her, sensing her turmoil. "We'll find out, Emma. We'll get to the bottom of this. But we have to be careful, and we have to be careful, and we have to be smart. These people play by their own rules, and they won't hesitate to protect their secrets." Emma nodded, steeling herself for what lay ahead. Whatever dangers awaited them, she would face them head on. Because for Claire, for the daughter she loved more than anything in the world, no risk was too great. The journey to uncover the truth had only just begun, and Emma was ready to confront it, one dangerous step at a time. Sometimes, people are pulled into these kinds of situations without fully grasping the dangers until they're in too deep, Brandon said quietly as he stopped the car near an old, run-down warehouse. The structure loomed ahead of them, its faded walls scarred with age and neglect. "We'll start here. I've heard rumors that this place might be a meeting point for some of Claire's contacts." They stepped out of the car, moving cautiously, sticking to the shadows that cloaked the area in a tense stillness. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing in her ears, making every little sound feel magnified. The eerie quiet of the surroundings only heightened her anxiety. Brandon raised a finger to his lips, signaling her to remain silent. Together they crept closer to the building, peering through the grime-streaked windows in search of any signs of activity inside. Through the dirt-encrusted glass, they could just make out the forms of several people huddled around a table, their voices hushed, engaged in what looked like a secretive conversation. Brandon quickly pulled Emma back out of sight, his breath steady but tense. "Those must be some of Claire's contacts. We can't confront them directly, it's too dangerous," he whispered urgently. Reaching into his jacket, he pulled out a small camera. "I'll take some photos and try to identify them later." As Emma crouched beside him, hidden in the shadows, she felt a swirl of emotions. Fear gripped her tightly, but so did an undeniable surge of courage. "We can't stop now, Brandon," she whispered back, her voice trembling but resolute. "No matter how scared I am, I need to keep going. Claire is my daughter, and I would do anything to find out what happened to her." Her fierce determination fueled Brandon's resolve, and he nodded in agreement, deeply moved by her unrelenting commitment. With a final glance at the warehouse, they slipped back into the car, the weight of what they had just witnessed pressing heavily on their minds. Each step, each new clue, brought them closer to uncovering the truth about Claire, no matter how dark or dangerous it might be. Later that night, back in his office, Brandon sat at his desk, carefully reviewing the photos he had taken at the warehouse. His eyes scanned the images, searching for any detail that might provide a lead. The office was quiet, the only sound the soft rustle of papers as he sifted through evidence. Suddenly, his phone rang, breaking the silence. The caller ID displayed an unknown number, and with a hint of hesitation, Brandon picked it up and pressed the phone to his ear. "Hello," he answered, his voice cautious, every sense on high alert for any hint of trouble. On the other end of the line, a distorted voice spoke, the tone chilling and devoid of emotion. "You're meddling where you don't belong. Stop this investigation now." The words were sharp, like icy daggers piercing through the calm of the night. A cold shiver ran down Brandon's spine, but he steadied himself, refusing to show fear. His voice remained calm and controlled. "Who is this? Why do you want me to stop?" he asked, though he knew he wasn't likely to receive an answer. The line went dead, the silence that followed almost more unsettling than the threat itself. Brandon slowly lowered the phone, his mind racing. He had expected danger, but now it had found him, rearing its head in the form of a shadowy voice. Whatever he and Emma had stumbled upon was bigger and more dangerous than they had anticipated. But one thing was certain: they couldn't back down now. There was a momentary silence on the line before the voice returned, this time more sinister, dripping with malice. "It's none of your business who we are, but if you persist, the consequences will be severe." With that, the call abruptly ended, leaving Brandon gripping the phone tightly, his heart pounding from the veiled threat. The room seemed to close in around him, the silence now heavier, filled with the weight of danger lurking just beyond the surface. Despite the pulse of fear that coursed through him, Brandon knew deep down that retreat was not an option. His thoughts immediately turned to Emma, to the torment she was enduring, and how much was at stake. He couldn't leave her to face this nightmare alone. "They're trying to scare us off," Brandon muttered to himself, feeling a surge of anger rise alongside his resolve. But that only confirms we're onto something significant. They wouldn't be this desperate to silence us if there wasn't something big they were trying to hide. Without hesitation, Brandon picked up his phone and dialed Emma's number, his mind racing as he prepared to tell her about the threat. When she answered, he didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Emma, I just received a threatening call. They warned us to stop the investigation. I wanted you to be aware, just in case. Are you okay?" There was a pause on the other end, and Brandon braced himself for any sign of hesitation, but instead, Emma's voice came through stronger than ever. "Brandon, that's awful, but we can't let them intimidate us. If they're trying to scare us, that means we're getting close to the truth. We have to keep going. We owe it to Claire." "Are you okay?" Her concern for him was genuine, but beneath it, there was a fierce determination that fueled his own. "I'm fine," Emma, Brandon reassured her, feeling a sense of solidarity in her unwavering resolve. "And you're right. We'll continue, but we'll do it carefully. We need to stay one step ahead and make sure we're prepared for whatever comes next." The threat had only strengthened their bond, and together, they agreed to implement additional security measures, understanding that each step forward would demand even more vigilance, courage, and strategy. From that moment on, they moved forward with heightened awareness, knowing that the danger was real, but so was the possibility of uncovering the truth. And no matter how perilous the journey became, they would not rest until they found out what had happened to Claire, determined to see the fight through to the end. "Nothing will stop us, Emma. We will uncover the truth, no matter the cost," Brandon vowed, his voice filled with determination as they prepared for the increasingly treacherous road ahead. They both knew that the further they delved into this mystery, the more dangerous it would become, but neither of them was willing to back down now. Brandon's investigation had led them to a new lead. They were sitting in his car, discreetly parked a good distance away from an old, dilapidated factory on the outskirts of Phoenix. The building was shrouded in decay and neglect, but it had a reputation that hinted at far more than its crumbling exterior suggested. An informant of Brandon's, someone with ears to the streets, had overheard whispers about this place, a location tied to illegal dealings, and more importantly, the name Claire. "This is the place," Brandon said quietly, his eyes scanning the building through a pair of binoculars. "My contact mentioned that this location has been used for some very shady meetings, and Claire's name came up more than once." Emma's heart raced with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. "Do you think she's there now?" she asked, trying to peer through the grime-covered window of the car without drawing attention to herself. "I don't know for sure," Brandon admitted, his gaze never leaving the factory. "But something is happening here, something big. We need to find out what it is, but we can't rush in. Entering now would be too dangerous. We'll wait until nightfall when it's easier to move undetected." He put the binoculars away and instinctively checked the gun concealed beneath his coat, ensuring it was secure and ready if things went south. Emma nodded, understanding that their best chance of success lay in patience and caution. She watched the sun slowly sink below the horizon, each minute dragging out in agonizing silence. The tension between them grew as the daylight faded, casting long shadows over the factory, plunging the area into darkness. The air was thick with anticipation, and every sound seemed amplified in the stillness of the evening. Finally, Brandon glanced at his watch and then turned to Emma, his expression serious. "It's time. We need to be quick, and we need to be quiet. There's no room for mistakes. Are you ready?" Emma took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she nodded. The fear was there, gnawing at the edges of her resolve, but so was the unwavering determination that had carried her this far. "I'm ready," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "Let's find my daughter." With one last look at each other, they silently slipped out of the car, moving toward the darkened building with a shared sense of purpose. This was at the moment where everything could change. The truth they sought was within reach, but so were the dangers that had been lurking in the shadows all along. With cautious, deliberate steps, they approached the building. The door was slightly ajar, as if someone had left in haste, forgetting to secure it behind them. Brandon entered first, his senses on high alert, with Emma following closely behind. The interior was cloaked in darkness, the silence only broken by the soft drip of water in the distance and the occasional rustle of something unseen, perhaps a rat scurrying through the shadows. As they cautiously moved through the space, they began to notice signs that the place had been used recently. Still smoldering cigarette butts lay discarded on the ground, half-empty food cans scattered across a dusty table, and then, amidst it all, something far more personal, a woman's coat draped over a chair. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she immediately recognized it. Her heart skipped a beat. This is Claire's coat. She was here, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. Brandon placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his presence a steadying force. "We're close, Emma. We'll find out what happened," he promised, determination glinting in his eyes. They pressed on, their senses heightened, every step filled with both hope and trepidation. The factory's dimly lit corridors stretched ahead of them like a maze, and as they advanced carefully through the darkened passageways, they suddenly heard the murmur of low voices coming from a room just ahead. Light spilled out from the edges of the slightly open door. Brandon immediately signaled for Emma to remain silent, and together they crept closer, positioning themselves just out of sight. Peering through the crack in the door, they saw a woman standing with her back turned, speaking quietly to someone who remained obscured from view. Emma's breath hitched as she watched the familiar posture, the gesture she had memorized over a lifetime. Her heart raced as recognition struck her like a lightning bolt. "Claire," she breathed, barely audible, her voice thick with emotion. Unable to hold herself back any longer, she stepped forward, pushing the door open further. "Claire," she called, her voice louder than she had intended, driven by a mix of desperation and hope. The woman spun around sharply, her eyes wide with surprise and suspicion, clearly startled by the sudden intrusion. "Who are you? How do you know that name?" she demanded, her voice tense, her defensive stance revealing just how guarded she had become. Emma froze, tears welling in her eyes as she took in her daughter's face. Though time and circumstances had changed Claire, altering the features that once seemed so familiar, there was no mistaking her. "It's me, Emma." "Your mother," she said softly, stepping forward with her hands outstretched in a gesture of peace. "Please, Claire, I know it's you. I've been searching for you for so long." Her voice trembled with every word, each syllable laden with the weight of years spent wondering, fearing, and hoping against all odds. The tears she had been holding back finally began to spill over as she stood there, her heart aching for the daughter she had lost and now found again, desperate to bridge the chasm that had grown between them. The room fell silent, tension hanging in the air as the two women, mother and daughter, faced each other across the divide of time, uncertainty, and pain. Claire hesitated, looking at Emma with a mix of confusion and recognition. "Mom," she finally murmured, the resistance in her gaze beginning to fade. Claire looked at Emma, her eyes filled with emotion and a glimpse of fear. "Mom, you shouldn't be here," she said with a trembling voice. "It's too dangerous. You need to leave. I can't risk something happening to you too." Emma, firm and unyielding, approached Claire, holding her hands gently. "I am not going anywhere, Claire. I won't let you face this alone." Wherever you are is where I need to be too. We are in this together, no matter what." Claire tried to protest, the worry evident on her face. "Mom, please. I don't want you to get hurt because of me." Emma squeezed Claire's hands, looking directly into her eyes. "There is no place in the world I would rather be than by your side. Nothing will take me away from you, my daughter. We will resolve this together." Seeing the determination in her mother's eyes, Claire knew that arguing would be futile. With tear-filled eyes, she slowly nodded. "I had to do this. I had to disappear. It was the only way to protect all of us." Her voice was a whisper, laden with pain and regret. Emma approached and hugged Claire, holding her tightly. "None of that matters now. What matters is that you are alive, and we can help you. We can protect you," said Emma, comforting her daughter. Brandon, observing the scene, remained alert, knowing they might still face dangers, but relieved to have finally found Claire and brought some peace to Emma. Sitting in a discreet corner of the same abandoned building, Emma and Claire were having an intense conversation. Claire began to explain, her face showing traces of fatigue and worry. "Mom, when I got involved with these people, I didn't know how far it would go. It started with small favors, things that seemed harmless. But then I realized I was in something much bigger and more dangerous than I could have imagined." Emma listened, her heart tightening with each word. "They started threatening my friends, our family. I was scared, Mom. They told me the only way to ensure everyone's safety was if I disappeared. So we planned my fake death." Claire paused, swallowing hard, the pain evident in her eyes. "I didn't know what else to do. I went far away, changed my identity, everything to protect the people I love. I wanted to tell the truth, but every move I made was monitored. Only recently did I manage to get a bit of breathing room, but even so, it's not a real life." Claire sighed, resignation weighing on each word. Emma held Claire's hands, her own hands trembling. "Claire, my dear, what you went through, I can hardly imagine. But now that we know the truth, we can help you. We will find a way to end this, to bring you back home." Her voice was firm, trying to infuse some hope into the desperate situation. "I'm so tired, Mom. Tired of hiding, of living in fear. I just want to go home, but I'm afraid of the consequences my return might bring to all of us." Claire looked at Emma, seeking comfort, some answer. Emma replied, "Claire, what you did was incredibly risky, and I'm hurt for not knowing anything. But now we need to focus on what to do to resolve your situation," Emma said, her voice carrying both the pain of what had been revealed and the determination to move forward. Claire looked at her hands, visibly shaken by having to face not only her mother but also the consequences of her choices. "I know, Mom, and I am so sorry for everything. I was trying to protect our family, but I know I ended up doing more harm than good." Her voice was a whisper, almost lost in the silence of the room. "We will need a lawyer, someone who can help us navigate the legal issues that come with your return. Besides, we will have to talk to the police, explain everything that happened and why you faked your death," Emma explained, already thinking about the next practical steps. She knew the road ahead would be difficult and possibly full of more painful revelations. "I will be by your side, Claire, no matter what happens. We will not let you face this alone." Emma held Claire's hand, offering the physical comfort that words could not express. "We will also need emotional support. Perhaps a therapist can help you process everything that happened and deal with the trauma of living in hiding all these years." Claire nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "Thank you, Mom. I don't know if I deserve all this effort after what I caused, but I'm grateful to have you here." The emotion was evident in her voice, each word laden with regret and relief for finally being able to share her burden. "You are my daughter, and nothing in the world can change that. Together, we will fix this. It will take time, and it won't be easy, but we are strong. We always have been," Emma affirmed with conviction. Emma's resolution to support Claire not only renewed hope in both of them, but also strengthened the bond that fear and uncertainty had shaken. Now, more than ever, they needed each other to rebuild the lives that had been so drastically altered. Emma took her daughter home, and one day while they were there, the phone rang. She hesitated before answering, feeling a wave of anxiety. "Hello," she said, her voice unsteady. On the other end of the line, a distorted voice threatened, "You and your detective are meddling where you shouldn't. Drop this, or the consequences will be severe." The threat was clear and direct, making Emma's heart race with fear. She took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "I don't know what you're talking about. We're just trying to help my daughter," Emma responded, attempting to disguise the tremor in her voice. "Listen carefully," the voice continued. "We are not joking. This is bigger than you imagine. If you continue, we cannot guarantee your safety or that of your loved ones." The menacing voice then abruptly hung up, leaving Emma with the phone still in her hand, her body paralyzed by fear. When Brandon arrived later, Emma told him about the call, her expression worried and fearful. "Brandon, they threatened me. I'm scared of what they might do. Maybe we should stop this," she suggested, the uncertainty clear in her voice. Brandon listened attentively, his eyes serious as he considered the situation. "Emma, I understand your fear, and it's valid. But if we stop now, they will remain unpunished. We need to be cautious, of course, but we also need to continue. I'm here with you, and we will ensure that everything is done as safely as possible." His determination offered a timid comfort to Emma, who nodded slowly, recognizing that despite the danger, the truth about Claire needed to be uncovered. Days after the phone threat, Emma and Brandon decided to increase their precautions. They met at a local cafe, choosing a secluded and discreet corner to discuss the next steps. "We need to be more strategic," said Brandon, looking around to make sure no one was listening. "I will contact some of my colleagues to reinforce our security and maybe install some surveillance systems at your house." Emma agreed with a nod. "I trust you, Brandon. I just don't want to put anyone else in danger. It's bad enough that I'm involved in this." Her concern was palpable, each line of her face showing the weight of the fear and responsibility she felt for those around her. "I understand, Emma, and I won't let anything happen to you. We will find out who is behind this and make sure they pay for what they've done." Brandon's voice was firm, conveying a confidence that Emma desperately needed at that moment. The detective took out his phone and dialed a number. After a few moments, he began to speak softly, describing the situation and requesting help. When he hung up, he looked at Emma with a more relaxed expression. "My colleagues will start doing night patrols near your house. Also, a friend who specializes in technology will install cameras and alarms tomorrow." Emma felt a wave of relief, knowing she wasn't alone in this fight. "Thank you, Brandon. I don't know what I would do without your help," she said, holding his hands briefly, a gesture of gratitude and companionship. In the following days, with the new security measures in place, Emma and Brandon continued their investigation with renewed determination. After weeks of intensive investigation and many sleepless nights, they finally gathered enough evidence to present a solid case against the gang involved in Claire's fake disappearance and the subsequent threats. They managed to get documents, audio recordings, and videos that not only linked the gang members to criminal activities, but also showed their direct involvement in Claire's case. Cautiously, Brandon contacted a special police unit that dealt with organized crime and corruption. They arranged a meeting at a safe location, far from prying ears. During the meeting, Brandon and Emma handed over all the material they had collected, explaining in detail each piece of evidence and how it connected to the criminals. The officers from the specialized unit were impressed by the depth and scope of the investigation carried out by Brandon and Emma. They acted quickly, using the information provided to mount an operation to capture those involved. With the help of a tactical team, they conducted a series of coordinated raids on several gang hideouts. The operation was a success. Several gang members were arrested, including the leaders, who were caught by surprise and had no time to react or destroy additional evidence. The authorities also managed to recover a significant amount of documents and electronic materials that would further strengthen the case against the gang. Emma was present when the news of the arrests was confirmed. She felt a wave of relief and vindication, knowing that her struggle and the risks she had taken had finally brought justice. "We did it, Brandon. Finally, justice has been served," she said, her eyes brimming with tears of relief and gratitude. Brandon, standing beside Emma, shared the sense of accomplishment. "You were incredible throughout this process, Emma. Your courage and determination were essential for us to get this far." Together, they watched the beginning of the judicial process against the criminals, feeling a deep satisfaction for having helped make the streets a little safer and for having honored Claire's struggle to protect her family. On a peaceful afternoon, bathed in the quiet serenity of a small, cozy cafe, Claire, Emma, and Brandon gathered to celebrate the long-fought victory that had finally come to fruition. Their hearts were lighter, and the weight of their collective struggle seemed to have been lifted, if only for a moment. Claire sat at the table, her hands reaching out to grasp those of her mother and Brandon, feeling an overwhelming wave of gratitude wash over her. Her voice trembled with emotion as she began to speak, her eyes reflecting the depth of her appreciation. "I never imagined we would reach this point," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "Mom, Brandon, I owe everything to you. Your courage, your unwavering determination. Without it, I'm not sure I would have found the strength to face all of this." Emma's face softened into a loving smile as she gently squeezed Claire's hand. "You're my daughter, Claire," she said, her voice filled with warmth and pride. "There isn't anything I wouldn't do for you. Seeing you safe, seeing justice served, it's all I ever wanted. It's all that matters to me." Brandon, his own emotions stirred by the moment, chimed in with sincerity. "It wasn't easy, Claire. This journey has tested us all in ways we never expected. But through it all, you showed a strength that was nothing short of extraordinary. Helping you and your mother was never a burden, it was something I did with all my heart. I'm just relieved that everything turned out the way it did." Tears welled in Claire's eyes as she looked at the two people who had stood by her side through thick and thin. "You both didn't just fight for me, you gave me a chance to start over, a chance to rebuild my life from the ground up. All I want now is to live in a way that makes all this effort worth it. Thank you for believing in me, even when everything seemed hopeless." Emma and Brandon exchanged a look, their smiles a reflection of the love and hope they felt for Claire. "There's no need to thank us," Emma said softly. "We're family, Claire. And families take care of each other. That's what we do." Brandon nodded in agreement, his voice steady. "Exactly. And now we'll move forward together." In that moment, their bond felt stronger than ever, cemented by the trials they had endured and the gratitude that now filled their hearts. The unspoken promise to stand by one another no matter what the future held was a quiet, powerful truth that each of them carried with them. Later that day, Emma and Claire found themselves walking hand in hand through the cemetery, retracing their steps to the place where so much pain and uncertainty had begun. The day was overcast, the sky heavy with clouds that seemed to mirror the somberness of the moment. A gentle breeze whispered through the trees, carrying with it a sense of quiet reverence. They moved slowly down the aisle of gravestones until they reached the plot that had once been the epicenter of their pain, the source of so much mystery and heartache. Emma stood before the headstone, her hands trembling slightly as she held a new plaque in her hands, one that would finally honor the true identity of the person resting beneath the earth. The old headstone, which still bore Claire's name, felt like a ghost of a past that had been shrouded in lies. "We're here to do what's right," Emma said, her voice firm despite the emotion that threatened to spill over. "It's time to correct the mistakes of the past." Claire nodded, tears brimming in her eyes as she knelt beside her mother. Together, they carefully removed the old headstone, their hands working in unison to install the new one. It was a moment of both physical and emotional reconstruction, a way of righting the wrongs that had haunted them for so long. "I never thought it would come to this," Claire murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "To be here, not as the person who was buried, but as someone who has been given a second chance to set things right." As they stepped back, their eyes fell on the newly engraved name Anna Lewis. The stone now bore the name of the woman who had been unjustly hidden behind Claire's identity for so many years. It was a bittersweet moment, filled with both sorrow and relief. Claire placed a bouquet of fresh flowers at the base of the headstone, her tears finally spilling over as she whispered, "I'm sorry for everything, Anna. I'm sorry for what happened to you." She turned to Emma, her voice cracking with emotion. "And thank you, Mom. Thank you for standing by me, even when I didn't deserve it." Emma pulled Claire into a tight embrace, her heart aching with both love and understanding. "We'll get through this, Claire, together. What matters is that you're here now and that we're making things right. That's what families do. They support each other, no matter what." And so, with a sense of peace slowly settling over them, they turned away from the grave, their hands still intertwined. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one that would be written with the strength of their love, their resilience, and their unbreakable bond as a family. Together, they walked forward into the future, ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that they could overcome anything as long as they had each other. They walked away from the grave, leaving behind not just the newly revealed truth, but an entire chapter of their lives, a chapter filled with pain, confusion, and uncertainty. Now, with that dark part of their past finally put to rest, they were ready to embrace a new beginning, bound together by a resilience forged in adversity, stronger than ever before. As the investigation wound down and life began to regain some semblance of normalcy, Claire found herself growing closer to Jory. What had started as a partnership born out of necessity was now transforming into something much deeper. They began to confide in each other, sharing stories of their lives, their fears, and their hopes for the future. Jorge, who had always admired Claire's strength from a distance, now found himself drawn to her in ways he hadn't expected. One afternoon, after hours of poring over documents and meticulously planning the next steps in the investigation, Jorge and Claire found themselves sitting together at a quiet cafe just around the corner from Brandon's office. The air was filled with the comforting hum of conversation and the rich aroma of coffee, but Jory could focus on nothing but Claire. There was something about her, the fierce dedication she had to uncovering the truth, the way she carried herself with unyielding determination that captivated him entirely. He admired her strength, but it was more than that. There was a fire in her spirit that he couldn't help but be drawn to. "Claire," Jorge began, his voice filled with sincerity and admiration. His gaze locked on hers as he spoke. "I've always known you were strong, remarkably strong, but watching you these past few months, seeing how fiercely you fight for your family, it's made me respect you even more than I ever thought possible." Claire's heart swelled at Jorge's words, her smile spreading slowly across her face, a warmth growing in her chest. His words touched her deeply, more than he could ever know. "Thank you, Jorge," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "This journey, it's been harder than I ever imagined, but knowing that I'm not alone, knowing that you, Emma, and Samantha are by my side, it gives me the strength to keep moving forward. Your support means everything to me." As the days went on, what had once been simple, task-focused meetings between Jorge and Claire began to carry a different weight. There were unspoken feelings that hung in the air, emotions that neither of them could ignore. The connection between them deepened with each passing day, the mutual respect and admiration slowly transforming into something far more profound. One crisp afternoon, as they strolled through a park bathed in the soft, golden light of autumn, Jorge felt his heart race with every step. The leaves crunched beneath their feet, and the air was filled with the earthy scent of the changing season. He could feel the tension building inside him, the words he had been holding back for so long now fighting to escape. Finally, unable to keep his feelings hidden any longer, Jorge turned to Claire. His heart pounded in his chest, his nerves raw as he prepared to bare his soul. "Claire," he began, his voice trembling slightly, I've started to feel something more for you. These past few months, you've become so much more than just a friend to me. You've become someone incredibly important, someone I care about deeply." Claire stopped in her tracks, her breath catching in her throat. She looked at Jorge, her eyes wide with surprise, but behind that surprise was a glimmer of something else, something warm, something real. Her heart raced as she absorbed his words, the vulnerability in his voice resonating with her own unspoken feelings. "Jorge," she whispered, her voice soft but filled with emotion, "I felt the same way for a while now. I didn't know how to tell you, I was afraid to complicate things between us. But hearing you say this, it makes me so happy. I'm glad you feel the same way." And with that, the distance that had once existed between them seemed to dissolve, replaced by the unshakable bond of two people who had not only faced hardship together, but had also found something beautiful amidst the chaos. Their relationship, once rooted in necessity, was now blooming into something much deeper, a connection built on mutual respect, shared struggles, and the promise of something new. As they continued walking through the park, side by side, Jorge and Claire knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together, stronger than ever. Claire paused, feeling her breath hitch as Jorge's confession settled over her like a warm embrace. For a moment, she couldn't find the words, overwhelmed by a mixture of surprise and happiness. She searched his face, and as her initial shock faded, her expression softened into one of pure joy. "Jorge," she whispered, her voice tinged with a mixture of relief and excitement. "I felt the same way for so long. I've just been too afraid to say anything. I didn't want to risk complicating things between us. But now that you've shared your feelings, I'm so glad we're finally on the same page." With the weight of the mystery surrounding the headstones finally lifted and the long-hidden truths laid bare, Claire and Jorge found themselves standing at the precipice of a new beginning. The burdens that had once pressed heavily upon their hearts were now fading, replaced by the peace that comes from facing the past and moving forward. In each other's presence, they found solace, and in their shared journey, they discovered a love that had quietly grown amidst the turmoil. Now, with a sense of closure settling over them, they embraced the promise of a future built together, two souls who had weathered life's storms and emerged stronger, ready to build something beautiful. Samantha and Emma, witnessing the blossoming happiness between Jorge and Claire, offered their wholehearted support. After all the heartbreak and uncertainty, it brought them immense joy to see light returning to their lives. There was a shared understanding that after so much struggle, they all deserved a moment to simply breathe, to embrace the joy that was finally making its way back into their hearts. One radiant afternoon, the three women, Emma, Claire, and Samantha, gathered at the local park, a place that had come to symbolize hope and renewal for them. Emma sat quietly on a bench, watching as Claire and Samantha kicked a soccer ball back and forth across the soft, sunlit grass. Their laughter echoed in the air, a sound that warmed Emma's heart in ways she hadn't felt in a long time. When Claire finally took a seat beside her, Emma couldn't help but voice the thoughts that had been swirling in her mind. "It's such a relief to see you both like this," she said softly, her gaze never leaving the sight of Samantha running joyfully across the field. "It feels like we can finally breathe again, like we've managed to leave the shadows of the past behind us." Claire smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude as she followed her mother's gaze to Samantha, whose laughter filled the air like music. "Mom," Claire began, her voice thick with emotion, "I wouldn't have made it through any of this without you and Samantha by my side. Somehow, she's brought us even closer than I ever imagined we could be. She's the daughter I never had, and I can't thank you enough for bringing her into my life." Claire's words were laced with sincerity, and when Emma looked at her daughter, she saw something new and unmistakable light in Claire's eyes that hadn't been there before. It was the light of someone who had found her way through the darkness and was finally stepping into the warmth of hope. Samantha, noticing her mother and grandmother sitting together, bounded over to them with her usual exuberance. "Come on, Grandma," she exclaimed, her voice filled with boundless energy. "Come play with us." Emma chuckled, the sound of Samantha's excitement contagious. All right," she said, standing up and brushing the grass from her clothes. "Let's see if I can still keep up with you two." As they played together, their laughter and joy filled the air, weaving through the park like a gentle breeze. And in that moment, as Claire watched the two people she loved most in the world, she realized just how far they had come. The past, with all its pain and confusion, was behind them now. What mattered was that they were together, and together they had the strength to face whatever came next. Suddenly, Samantha came rushing toward them, her small feet barely touching the ground as she launched herself into Emma's arms with all the exuberance her young body could muster. "Grandma," she cried, her voice brimming with an infectious enthusiasm that only a child could possess. "Will you come play with us?" Emma couldn't help but laugh, her heart swelling with love as she looked down at the eager face peering up at her. The warmth of Samantha's embrace stirred something deep within her, something that had long been dormant. "Of course, sweetheart," Emma replied with a chuckle, her eyes twinkling with affection. "Let's see if I still remember how to play." She rose from the bench, her joints creaking slightly, but there was a newfound lightness in her step. As she joined Samantha on the field, a sense of joy washed over her, one she hadn't felt in what seemed like a lifetime. The laughter, the playful energy, it all filled her soul with a happiness she hadn't realized she'd been missing. From a distance, Claire watched the scene unfold, her heart swelling with gratitude as she took in the sight of her mother and Samantha playing together. A soft smile tugged at her lips as she called out, her voice laced with a newfound clarity. "You know, Mom," she said, the words hanging in the air like a gentle breeze, "I think we've finally come to understand what truly matters in life. No matter what we've been through, we're here now together, and that's what counts." Claire couldn't resist the pull any longer, and she joined the game, her laughter mingling with Samantha's as they kicked the ball back and forth across the field. The day slowly slipped away, the sun dipping low in the sky, casting a warm, golden glow over them as it made its descent toward the horizon. The light of day gave way to the soft embrace of evening, and with it came a peaceful stillness that wrapped around the three of them like a comforting blanket. Hand in hand, they began the walk home, the rhythm of their footsteps echoing in the quiet of the evening. Emma glanced at Claire and Samantha, her heart overflowing with an overwhelming sense of love and protection for them both. In that moment, she knew that no matter what had happened, no matter what lay ahead, they would face it together. "We're in this together," she said softly, squeezing their hands with quiet determination. "We're a family, and nothing can change that." And so, step by step, they continued on their path of healing and rebuilding, their bond deepening with each passing day. The road ahead might be uncertain, but they faced it with unshakable faith in one another. United in love, resilience, and the strength that comes from standing together, they knew they could overcome anything that life might throw their way. Together, they were unstoppable. What have you learned from this emotional journey? Has this story of loss, discovery, and resilience touched your heart? Please share in the comments below one thing you've learned and will bring into your own life. We'd love to hear your reflections and thoughts. If you like this video, please leave your comment below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.